Hello everybody and welcome back. As always, I'm Mateo311 and this is your channel for everything VR related. Today, we are comparing the Quest 2 to the Quest 3. Now instead of just giving you a bunch of specs side by side, which is meaningless to most people, I'm going to let you know what it feels like in the real world, as I have hands-on experience with both of these devices. Now additionally, I'll let you know if you should consider upgrading or making the Quest 3 your first purchase. Now, there are, of course, links and timestamps if you want to skip ahead to a certain topic. But before we jump in, this video is brought to you by my sponsor, Kiwi Design. Have you added about 15 accessories to your Quest 2 and it no longer fits in the official case? Well, don't worry, because Kiwi has you covered. Kiwi's brand new carrying case guarantees to fit 9 accessories. There's pockets for extra cables, an ample amount of padding, and a hard exterior to help protect your device, plus a nice sleek black water resistant design. There's a link in the description to their website, and don't forget to use discount code Mateo311 for 5% off and to help support my channel. Okay, so let's start off with the most obvious difference, the price tag. The Quest 2 is currently retailing at $300 and the Quest 3 is at $500, and there are upgrades available for both headsets. The Quest 3 upgrade, which gives it 512 gigabytes, puts the price tag at $650, which is really beefy. But at the base model, that's still like a 60+% price difference. So obviously you're going to be paying a lot more, but of course it comes with upgraded tech and some new features. So let's dive into those. And the one that I find the most meaningful is the brand new XR2 Gen 2 chipset. This is what powers the device, and it has twice the power of the Quest 2. So overall, that's a very significant bump. Now in real life, what that actually means is smoother games, higher frame rates, and better overall graphics running at higher resolutions. I will get back to this topic later on when I discuss gaming itself, but just know your visual is going to be clearer. And what's going to really help that also is the brand new pancake lens. So this new design allows you to not only shrink the device much smaller, but it also gives you edge-to-edge clarity. And this is something that shouldn't be understated. If you've used a Quest Pro or a Pico 4, you know what I'm talking about. There's no longer a sweet spot. The whole screen is the sweet spot. So your eyes aren't going to be out of focus if you're not wearing the headset just right. Edge-to-edge clarity. You don't get those same artifacts and distortion you saw on earlier headsets. So that is a big overall boost, and honestly one of the best things on this device if you're going from a Quest 2. Now something else that's definitely going to help clarity is the new LCD panel, which actually has 30% more pixels and a resolution that's actually a little bit higher than the PlayStation VR 2. But this is something we have to discuss a little bit more. A higher resolution panel kind of means nothing, because right now on the Quest 2, none of the Quest 2 native games run at that resolution. They all run at lower resolutions. So don't think you're getting this huge resolution bump in your games. It's not going to happen like that. It'll be beneficial in things like Netflix, and it's also really beneficial in reducing the screen door effect, which I'll be honest, I couldn't see it all on this headset. Really, like maybe if I really look for it, but honestly, the screen door is basically gone. So don't look at that panel and say, wow, we're getting the best graphics, except, you know, maybe in something like movies, but it does eliminate the screen door effect. And overall, you know, it's a little bit of future proofing and very beneficial for PCVR if you have the hardware to handle it. Now, there's also been a field of view increase for the Quest 3, but this is a little bit of a tricky subject. Now, if you're not familiar, the field of view is basically how far out you can see in the headset this way. So, you know, if you feel like the Quest 2 is like wearing scuba gear or goggles, that's because it has a smaller FOV. A higher FOV is obviously preferred, and that's why I like something like my Valve Index. But when you look at the numbers out there, they're all over the place. Like they'll give you an official number, like the Valve Index says 130, but then some people will measure it at like 110, 115. So basically how close the lens is to your eyes will impact your overall FOV. But this headset is getting an increase. Undoubtedly, there is an increase. It's currently listed as 110 degrees. Now, what does that mean in reality? Are you going to be like, wow, everything looks better, I don't feel like I'm wearing goggles anymore? Probably not. Now, my daily drivers are a Valve Index, which is a pretty good FOV, and the Quest Pro. Those are the headsets I use most often. Occasionally, I still use my Quest 2. And when I put on the Quest 3, there wasn't an immediate difference. I didn't feel like, oh wow, this FOV is definitely bigger or it's smaller than my index. It felt right around the same, not a huge change. I think if I do a side by side and, check back and forth between the headsets, it's more noticeable. But otherwise, if you're switching for the FOV, I think you'll be disappointed. Now, another new addition on the Quest 3 is a larger IPD range. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, that's your interpupillary distance, space between your eyes. You want the screens to match that. Otherwise, it could cause eye strain, fatigue, or maybe a little bit of blurriness. The Quest 2 had 3 separate positions. That's it. You can only do 3 specific IP adjustments. However, on the Quest 3, there's a rocker, and you can go all the way from 58 to 71, whatever matches you perfectly. So that's just a little bit more ideal and more convenient. If you're someone who wears glasses or has a big nose like me and has to use the eyeglass spacer in the Quest 2, well, that is now built into the Quest 3, and you can kind of just move the screen further and closer away from your head without having to install an extra piece of plastic. So another nice bonus there. If comfort is something you're concerned about, well, then I have more good news, because the Quest 3, well, it doesn't actually weigh less than the Quest 2. Since it's much smaller and is much closer to your face, the weight distribution is a lot better. So you won't feel it digging into like the brim of your nose or your cheeks. The pressure felt much more evenly spaced throughout my entire face. And one thing I noticed, I did try this at an event. There were roughly 10 people wearing Quest the whole time. No one had VR face, which just shows that it's evenly spaced on your face. It's not causing too much pressure, and ultimately should be more comfortable, which is how I walked away. I felt like the Quest 3, even with the dopey cloth default strap, was pretty darn comfortable. Now, I personally am going to get an Elite strap. I think it's going to be better, have a little bit more support. But unlike the Quest 2, where I found the elastic strap just unusable, completely unusable and unsupporting, on the Quest 3, it was fine. Now, the last new hardware addition is a depth sensor, which is going to make this device capable of better AR experiences. The depth sensor is used to determine where walls, the floor, and other objects are, so it could more accurately place objects on those things. You also get the added benefit of room setup being much easier. There's no longer bend down, touch the floor with your controller, trace your room. Nope. All you do is basically look around for 30 seconds or so, and room scale does the rest. It just knows where a wall is, it knows where the floor is, it knows where the ceiling is. And then there is the option, if you're going to do, mixed reality stuff, to label certain things, like say, that's my couch and this is a table. And then it kind of knows, so those can be anchor points for you. But that's basically all the internal hardware that's changed. Let's move on to what else has changed, and that's the controllers. We now have brand new ringless controllers that Meta is calling Touch Plus. Now, these shouldn't be confused with the Touch Pro that's on the Quest Pro. These are an updated version of the Quest 2 controllers. They still use infrared tracking, which is a spectrum of light that you can't see, but the headset can. So around the ring of the controller itself, not the external ring because that's gone, but just the circle, there are now IR emitters, and the headset is tracking that. They've also changed the camera position to give you more overall coverage, and they've upgraded the algorithms. So they're pretty confident that these controllers should track a lot better than the Quest 2 controllers. And in my personal experience, they track at least as good. Now, I've only had about 45 minutes at the event, and I'm just getting to testing out the Quest 3 at home. But from what I've seen, they track just as good. I'm not a professional Beat Saber player, so I can't really speak to that just yet, but I will attempt some tests like that for my full review. Now, those controllers also have a 2-stage trigger now, so you can press it in 2 places. You press it lightly, it does one thing. You press it even harder, it does something else. Kind of like the adaptive trigger on the PlayStation VR 2, but not as much feedback there. Now, additionally, they've also improved the haptics, but I didn't notice anything. I know some people say the Quest Pro controllers feel amazing. I don't notice anything on them either. Maybe it's because I'm so used to index controllers, or I even started out with Vive wands, which had a pretty decent kick to them. I don't know what the case may be, but I didn't really notice a big difference in the haptics. I feel like both the Quest 2, Quest Pro, and Quest 3 hand haptics are just like underpowered in my personal opinion, but maybe I just have too big calluses on my hands. Now, the subject I'm sure a lot of you guys are interested in is how much better are the games on the Quest 3? Is every game going to be instantly better? What should we expect? Well, if a developer wants to take full advantage of the Quest 3 hardware, then yes, a game can look significantly better. And I saw a few demos of that, even got to try one, which was Red Matter 2. Red Matter 2, the version they let us demo, actually allows you to jump back into an emulation of the Quest 2 version. So you could just sit there and go, okay, this is what it looks like on Quest 3, click, Quest 2, Quest 3, Quest 2, Quest 3, Quest 2. And the differences are striking. I'm going to put up some video comparisons for you guys. But the difference is really striking. You know, I always see the jaggy edges, which is telltale sign of a low resolution gameplay. Additionally, foveated rendering really stands out for me, and I wasn't seeing that in any of the titles. So that's really going to help there with your overall visuals. Your normal games should just, in general, look or at least run better on the Quest 3. There should be a minimal like upscaling that happens automatically, but for a real graphical difference, the developer is going to have to get in there and make some changes. Now, some are already working on that, like Saints and Sinners, Red Matter. I know Zenith is also on that list, and I'm sure a lot of others will follow suit. So basically, we can get more robust, better looking games because we have a lot more power pushing the hardware. If you want to compare it to a PCVR experience, it's definitely still not there, but we're inching our way closer to that PCVR experience. And I'd say it's something like maybe a lower end hardware system with something like a GTX 1060. Maybe we're getting close to that. So just to give you guys an understanding of what this standalone device is now delivering, which honestly is pretty darn impressive. But if you are a PCVR snob or a graphics snob, yeah, it'll underwhelm in native standalone mode. Now, in terms of Quest 3 exclusives that take full advantage of that hardware, leave the Quest 2 behind and show us everything they got, they don't exist. And we probably won't see them for at least a year. You know, Meta's not ready to throw out the Quest 2 just yet. They're hoping the Quest 3 hype might even, get some people to get a Quest 2 instead because it's significantly cheaper. So they're not ready to throw out the Quest 2 yet. You can give it at least a year before we see Quest 3 exclusives, at least in my opinion. Now, moving on to the next biggest deal is the AR functionality, which is something that actually exists on the Quest 2, but it's pretty terrible. You get a low resolution, grainy, grayscale image if you activate the pass-through on your Quest 2. Now, if you do it on your Quest 3, I think most people will be impressed because it's pretty darn clear. Significantly better than the Quest Pro. Now, personally, I don't find the Quest Pro up to snuff. I don't think the pass-through is good at all, but the Quest 3, on the other hand, definitely impressed me. Now, when it comes to color representation, they were definitely a bit dimmer and not as accurate as real life, but you were able to see everything really clear, and I was impressed overall, especially after being someone who used the Quest Pro for a long time. I was expecting disappointment, so it was nice to see they significantly improved on pass-through experience. Overall, that is great. When it comes to the mixed reality games, I feel like we're back to 2017 VR tech demos. And I think it's going to be like that for a little while until someone figures out like an excellent use case. They were cool. Mixed reality was cool. I'm just not sure it's better than VR or something I necessarily need or want. Now, obviously, I need a lot more time with it to get a better understanding at least. Like, maybe I would fall in love with mixed reality board games. Some aspect of it will really sell me. Or maybe there's something out there like a future Beat Saber. You couldn't really imagine Beat Saber until the game was made, and then you go, oh, cool, that makes sense. It's so much fun. So maybe there's a mixed reality game like that that's yet to be made. That's really going to sell us and take us in a new direction. Or they're going to give us functionality that is just great for your overall life. I know they're working on things like virtual anchors, so you could put things in your room. Like, I want to put up pictures over there. I just personally feel like that's gimmicky, but some people might love that. For me, the AR is not adding much yet. But like I said, we'll wait and see what happens in the future. Now, Meta didn't let us capture any through the lens footage for whatever reason. I know some people are running over to Best Buy now and trying to snap some pictures. I don't know, maybe a software update was coming. Maybe they were worried because, they were doing these demos in random locations all over the world. so they didn't know what the lighting situation would be like, and they just didn't want it to be represented poorly. Someone gets some footage where it just doesn't look good. I could say in my experience, it looked great. I spoke to someone else in a different location. They said, oh, the pass-through was definitely better than the Quest Pro, but not as good as I expected, which honestly surprised me. So, maybe that's one thing. There was a software update waiting to go out. Maybe, lighting plays a much bigger deal than I know right now. Those are some unknown factors, but I'll put up some pictures that have been shown online. And additionally, you got to understand that modern cameras kind of clean up images automatically. So it might not look this good. It might look close to this. It's really hard to say. You just got to wait and experience it yourself. But let's get in probably the biggest question to answer. Should you upgrade from the Quest 2? Should you upgrade for PCVR? And if you've never jumped into VR before, should the Quest 3 be your first headset? So starting with the first option, should you update from Quest 2 to Quest 3? Well, if you had your Quest 2 and only used it like sparingly, it didn't really suck you in, you're not in love with VR, it's probably not a necessary upgrade for you, because there's nothing about the Quest 3 that makes VR that much more appealing, or Quest gaming that much more appealing. Sure, graphics will be a little bit better. Sure, it's a little bit more comfortable, but unless graphics and comfort were really holding you back, you don't necessarily need to upgrade, at least not immediately. Now, if you are a huge standalone VR fan, you love everything on VR, everything the Quest 2 has to offer, yeah, go ahead and upgrade. You will enjoy it. You'll love that edge-to-edge clarity of the pancake lens. You'll be happy that the games that you enjoy playing look better, run better, etc. So, for the VR fanatic, I do recommend it, definitely. Now, if you're going to get this for PCVR, we'll stop and say, okay, are you upgrading, or are you getting it for your first PCVR headset? If you're getting it for your first PCVR headset and you have a pretty solid machine, yeah, get the Quest 3. It's going to be impressive. That high resolution panel is going to make your games look great. And again, pancake lens, yada, yada, yada. It's going to be really nice for PCVR. And on paper, it should also be a lot better than the Quest 2 with Wi-Fi 6E and better encoders with the new chip. So you should definitely, get a better wireless experience, but that's on paper right now. We got to see how that translates in the real world when I'm able to do more testing. Now, if you're upgrading, I would only consider it if you have a pretty high-end machine and you have an older VR headset. So you're talking about something like the original HTC. I wouldn't really consider doing it for a Valve Index update, because the Valve Index still has some benefits over it for sure, like the excellent sound, the excellent mic, the larger FOV, the ability for full body tracking. So I wouldn't upgrade over something like a Valve Index necessarily yet, unless, you're just done with your Index and it bothers you and you want to get rid of it and you don't use full body tracking, fine. But really it wouldn't be a full upgrade. It would be like a sidestep. And if this is going to be your first VR purchase, should you get a Quest 3 or a Quest 2? Well, it's hard for me to recommend the Quest 2 because it's aging out for sure. And you might end up loving VR, and then a year from now, there's games that are only available on the Quest 3, and you're frustrated and need to buy it anyway. So it's probably worth it to just suck it up and spend the extra $200, even though I understand $200 is a lot for someone. Maybe the best case scenario is to borrow someone's Quest 2, try it out for a while and see where you stand. But it's definitely getting a lot harder to recommend a Quest 2, and obviously I would recommend the Quest 3 over it. Now, when you go from the 128GB to the 512, I say for the average person, 128 is probably going to be fine, but you have to understand there's going to be some conditions there. Right now, that could probably give you storage for 5 to 20 games. Now, a lot of VR games are smaller. They're 10 gigs and under. But some of the bigger games like Resident Evil, maybe Asgard's Wrath, I'm not sure what the size is on yet, but you're looking at something like 50 gigs. So 50 gigs is pretty excessive, but that's on the extreme end. So in that case, you'd only get 2 games on the headset, which is terrible. But you have to stop and say, well, do I always play these games, or do I play them for 2 months, then move on to new games and never go back to those style of games? Or are you willing to spend the extra $150 just so you don't have to deal with that? So you don't have to worry about deleting games, making space, and downloading new games, or re-downloading a game a couple times, especially if you have slow Wi-Fi. that's, up to you really. Do you have that disposable income? Originally, I said on the Quest 2, 64 gigabytes is just too small. And probably a little bit down the road, I'll feel the same way about 128 on the lower end model. But that upcharge is insane. I know they are giving you 6 months of Quest Plus with it, which is 2 free games per month that you can try out. They curate the games. It's not like you can pick any 2 games you want. And that's a decent value and all, but still doesn't make up for that massive upcharge. And I think I basically covered everything. Now, I also have a list of questions from my first impressions video that I did that you guys wanted answered, which I will do in my full review. I've been writing down all those questions. I got a lot to go over for that, but I think this is the best Quest 2 versus Quest 3 comparison. Should answer most of your questions in that category. If I missed something, just drop it in the comments. I'll do my best to answer you. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. If you're new here, consider subscribing. And as always, I'll see you guys on next time.